All right, we're back with Tip of the Hershberg. We got a special guest this time. I apparently I asked her already. I forgot. But from her perspective, I must have been like just asking you so much. You're like, fine, I'll fucking do it. But it wasn't that. I just forgot completely. It wasn't wearing you out, wearing you down. It was indifference. It was reverse. But anyway.
I think indifference is always better than trying to wear someone down.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Definitely holds up in court better. So this is Isabel Hagen, good friend, one of the most talented people I know.
Stop it.
Violinist from Juilliard and violist.
I wasn't going to correct you. Did you notice that? I just let you do it.
At this point, you must have assumed I was like making a joke, right?
No, I just assumed you were dumb. No.
I make this mistake all the time. She plays the viola, which is not, I don't know if you know this, Fondy, did you know this? The viola and the violin are different.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
I know that.
He's pretty smart. Yeah, they're different. One is called a violin, and the other is called a viola. Those are the main differences, or are there other ones outside?
I thought you were going to make like a dumb joke.
No.
One's called the violin and one's called a fucking dumb fucking instrument.
Stupid fucking instrument for fucking morons.
Joe List is always like, you play a made up instrument.
It does seem like viola seems like they were making the violin and they had some early drafts. And viola was one of the early drafts. Like, what, viola? And then eventually they perfected it. Or like maybe the early name for the violin. We'll call it a viola. And they're like, nah, so that's a little too, what about violin?
They called it viola. Then some woman named Viola like broke their heart. And they were like,
yeah, we can't call it, yeah.
I have a new instrument.
Violin, yeah. But they are different. What are the main differences in a sentence, if you could say?
Viola is slightly bigger and lower in sound.
Okay.
Although they are physically played.
That's too much information. Just the first part. No, I'm joking.
Well, because then people are like, oh, like the cello? But no.
I don't even know what a cello is. So
You know what a cello is.
Yeah,
you play the cello sitting down between your legs.
Yeah, it's very sexual.
Very sexy instrument.
Yeah, probably the sexiest. It's the only one you're humping.
Yeah.
It's the only one you're scissoring, right?
I think so. I mean, I don't know, like a bass clarinet goes down between your legs, but that's not sexy.
But I guess let's just say this. Here's how you can, if you treated a person like they were a cello, it would be sexual assault unless it was consented, right?
Absolutely.
And that's probably the only instrument. If you treat someone like a clarinet, you'd be sucking air out of them.
If someone treated you like a clarinet, you should say thank you very much.
Right.
It was lovely.
Yeah. But so the cello is the legs, it's like the fucking, but viola is different. You're not fucking the viola.
No, you're more like kind of hugging it.
Hugging it, yeah.
Hugging it, yeah.
And that's similar to the violin.
Holding it,
yeah.
Hugging it. It's tender.
Yeah. It's a tender thing.
Yeah, the only difference is if you saw someone playing viola and violin back to back, you'd notice the viola is a little like wider under the neck than the violin.
I see.
So
what made you, when you were deciding what instrument, were you like, I could be a good violinist or the greatest viola player ever? Or how did that work? And is that question insulting?
It's incredibly insulting, Raanan.
I'm sorry.
But I feel like the most insulting things are because there's a little truth to it. So
I'm sorry, I'm just joking.
no, well, what happened was when I started on violin, like most children do.
Of course,
at 5. Not
most children. Hear this, Fonzie? Hear this fucking elitism? Like most children do. I started with the violin. What kind of J.D. Salinger? Like most children. Fucking Royal Tenenbaum over here. Like most children, I began with the violin.
My papa handed it to me.
Yes.
On my 5th Christmas.
That is most people's childhood, yes.
No, let me rephrase.
Yeah.
As most children wanting to start a string instrument.
Yes.
They pick the violin because it's just more standard. And then when I was 10, I had a crush on a guy who played the viola. And it was also, my mom was like, if you play the viola, you get more opportunities. And I was like, shut up. But then I met this guy and I was like, he's so cool. So then I switched to viola. And then, yeah, I was like in demand all of a sudden because I was 10 playing the viola. There were maybe like 2 other kids at my school played viola. So I really liked being needed, and that kind of got me more excited about it. And
so the viola is a real like a woman in comedy, essentially.
Actually, yes. How have I never quite made that comparison?
It's kind of like, yeah.
It's a way to other yourself in a lot of, that has a lot of benefits and some, and also negative things, like because the viola is sort of seen as the butt of every joke in the music world.
Yeah,
which is
like women in comedy are made fun of.
Exactly. There's this trope, women aren't funny, which is, actually very harmful to
harmful. Yes.
And then
I was trying to finish your sentence. Sorry.
And even though I love viola.
I don't think that. I just thought that's what you're going with.
Yes, I know. I don't know who I am yet. Can I just go? Sometimes I part of me wants to just be like, yeah, fucking, because they're not. Ha ha ha.
Right.
And then there's this other part of me that's like, don't, Isabel, you don't actually feel that way. You're being really hurtful if you make those kinds of jokes.
Right.
Obviously, it's a joke, but like, and I feel like I'm stuck in this like no man's land of like.
You feel like you can't make fun of it. You feel like you have to be like what do you mean exactly?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to be hurtful or not. That's not how I just feel like a lot of comedians are fearless and they just like say whatever and they're funny. And sometimes I feel like I shy away from that. And maybe it's good, or maybe it's keeping me from really fully exploring like what I want to do. Shy
away from like offending people with like offensive humor. Well, let's just make it clear, by the way, I don't actually think women are.
I know. Like,
you're like, I'm so torn whether I want to be a monster like you or not. I don't know.
No, of course we all don't. Neither of us think that, but like that kind of joke, like I love that kind of joke. But then I get nervous because we're on a podcast that like, well, I don't want to like, but it's just like, I feel like such a loser. Is what I'm trying to say. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I was, I mean, you don't want to make jokes. You don't want to like, you want to be, you're kind of saying you want to like make fun of shit, but you also don't want to be canceled.
I guess that's everyone's fear. I guess I'm not that special or different than anyone else.
Or you don't want to be like, well, you're not like an offensive person.
No.
You're very funny, a hilarious comic. I love your comedy. It's
so
great.
Much.
And it's so funny and so like, just like very, it's not, it's not a lot of fanfare. It's just great jokes, It's not like gimmicks or tricks, you know what I mean? I love it. I love your comedy. It's great.
I love your comedy.
Thank you.
I mean it. I'm not just returning that. You're one of my favorite comics.
Oh, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But the viola, it does seem like what I was saying about the viola, the best of it seems like what you're saying was you're like your mom's like more opportunities if you do that. But that's just because there's less viola players.
Right.
And now you're a stand-up comedian woman who plays the viola, and you're number one at that.
I mean, I think so.
You really developed. You are the number one leading female comedian viola player. I think you might be the only. Are you the only one?
I mean, if there's another one, I'll kill myself.
Well, you wait. They might, not be that funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, usually comedians who have instruments aren't that funny, but like, so you're probably but so yeah, you're probably you did Fallon, you played the viola on Fallon. It's got to be the first. It's like when I did Fallon, I was the first Jewish comedian on there.
Right.
You were the first viola playing comedian. So it's interesting how getting into the viola when you're younger, that sense of having a niche. I feel like a niche is a big, your career, your comedy, your art. A niche is a big part of it. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be, and like you should just feel like you have something to offer no matter who you are or what you're doing, but it does help to be rarer. Mm-hmm. It does just really help us. I mean, especially nowadays when everyone's looking for their thing and that sets them apart.
Right. There's so much oversaturation.
Yeah.
I feel that a lot. I'll do like comedy. I'll do like an hour and I'll be like, yeah, it was good, but so what? Like, so, you know what I mean? There's just so much of that. But interestingly, you were developing a niche when you were young, but you also had a crush. So that's kind of an interesting thing in terms of your artistic relationship to the viola was also based on a crush.
I think a lot of people do what they do deep down to impress one person or to impress a few people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
of course.
It becomes not the only reason, of course, but I mean, do you ever feel like there's someone, like when you feel like you've really made it, that you're going to be like, I can't wait for them to see?
All the women who turned down fucking me, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't a hot commodity when I was younger. I was, just whatever, awkward, no teeth, braces.
Not a very fuckable middle schooler.
No, and just what I would call clinically awkward. And I still am.
Awkward, yeah.
Like I can't, I'm getting better, but I can't not be physically awkward. Even when I think I'm being like smooth, like there is just like, I don't know, I'm just built strange. So
Yeah. You're very, but you're very quiet.
Yeah. So there's always this thought of like, man, like so and so. Even if even if they called me and were like, hey, do you want to go out? I would say no. I'm not interested anymore. But I still want them to see me succeed. Right.
So, wait, who is the people you want to succeed? Like that guy?
I want them to see me succeed.
The guy who like.
Well, no, he and I actually became like friends with him later on, and like I was 10. You know, your taste changed.
Right.
Sometimes.
Well, no, it is just I've never like. I don't think I personally got into. I mean, it's just interesting when like viola is such a big part of your life, and that choice was dependent on this guy, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I guess it's all random and arbitrary in the beginning, you know.
And anecdotally, it's fun. Obviously, there were other aspects to it, like being needed, like actually really liking playing like the inner voice in a string quartet. You know,
the inner voice. What is that?
So like if you have a choir, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, those are like different levels. Like the sopranos sing high, the basses sing low, and then two in between. Right? It's like a 4-part harmony.
Okay.
If you think about it that way, the viola is off because it's a lower instrument than the violin. It's playing like the middle voice, but it's higher than the cello. So you're often like in the middle, kind of like if you hear a chord of music, it sounds beautiful, but you don't really know why. But if you like broke it down, like what's making it like magical is like the inner notes that are adding the harmony.
Okay.
So it can be like just like really physically satisfying to play the viola in a group because you're kind of like, it sounds corny, but you're like adding the magic to it.
You're adding the magic. Oh, interesting.
Because otherwise it's just a melody singing played alone, which is nice, but gives it that feeling and like emotion, like to any movie score you listen to.
The viola is the one doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, or the second violin. I mean, everyone plays takes a turn, but it sort of like by default, the viola's in the middle there, supplying those notes.
It's like a kind of the core of it in a way, or
I feel like that. Yeah.
From my perspective.
Yeah. No, I mean,
it's like when Roald Dahl was like, writing children's books is the hardest thing you can do. I'm like, how convenient that you think that.
Right.
Children's books.
It's like when musicians are like, classical music is vital. I'm like, oh, is it?
Yeah, to you. Yeah, it's all. But that's interesting though. So the viola, because the viola doesn't have solos, right? Or does it?
It can. I mean, there's viola concertos, where the viola is standing in front of the orchestra playing the solo part of a piece. But not as, that viola concertos are much more prevalent in like the 20th century.
Like, is there any musical piece that's famous that I would know the viola from?
I guess the most famous piece, like popular, that features viola, maybe Harold in Italy by, I think, Berlioz, Harold in Italy.
I mean, this sounds like a deep cut, and I don't even know the shallow cuts.
Yeah, there's nothing you wouldn't know. Nothing you would know.
I don't even know what you're talking about. Is that like a movie, Harold in Italy? What is that?
Sounds like a good movie, right?
Harold, yeah, it sounds like a fun little like.
Yeah, by Berlioz.
Well, you seemed unsure of the guy's name, so I'm like, I'm definitely not going to know it if you're like, I think his name.
I was just having a brain fart. Hector Berlioz.
Okay.
He wrote Symphonie Fantastique, which is a pretty popular. If you heard Symphonie Fantastique, you'd probably recognize it.
So no one knows the viola is basically. I'm sorry. I'm joking.
No, their own because it wasn't made to be a solo instrument originally. It was made to be a part of a group, and then I think I'm not a music historian, but eventually, as people got more proficient technically and all the instruments, they wanted to be featured for whatever reason. So different people champion different instruments. Like there's this guy, Paul Hindemith, who wrote a lot of viola music because he was a violist, and it's just sort of makes sense because he was writing stuff that he would play, and
So the viola, if I'm getting this straight, and I feel like everything I'm going to say is simplifying shit, so I apologize. But the viola is kind of doing a lot of the heavy lifting and maybe not always getting the thanks.
Yeah, it's a real behind the scenes. It's a real first AD.
First AD, right. So it's like running the shop, really without it. If it was missing, you would notice.
Yes, but you can't usually hear it.
You can't hear it, but
pick it out.
Yeah.
But if you take it out, you might notice.
Interesting.
I mean, you might not because.
And that's kind of like it's almost like you socially,
Yeah.
I don't notice you're there. But when you're gone, I feel an absence.
You're like, where's Isabel?
Because you're very quiet. The spotlight's not on you ever.
No.
But you are a part of the group.
Yes.
So the viola is your social spirit animal in a sense.
It really is.
But then you also do stand-up, which is more of the spotlight, I guess, in a sense, right?
Yeah, it's all spotlight.
Right, it's all spotlight.
Yeah.
Did you feel like the viola wasn't, even though you recognized how much it is a crucial part of the orchestra, the symphony, did you feel like stand-up gave you more attention that you weren't getting exactly from viola?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder sometimes because part of it is that music was something I did when I was really little, and I had a lot of anxiety around it, and started thinking I just was terrible, and had this whole negative vision of myself as a violist. And then stand-up was this like new pursuit that I was doing when I was a little healthier and mentally, and it's just more suited, and I'm more creatively fulfilled. And then part of me is like, is it just because I like the attention? And it's like I get to be like the soloist all the time.
Well, I mean, that's not a bad thing. I mean, to want I always thought there's so many bad stand-up. When I started doing open mics, there's so many like stand-ups where you're like, this person's awful. Why are they doing this? Yeah. And then at some point you realize, the people who do stand-up are just the people who want attention, and then some of them are good. Like it's almost like what makes someone do stand-up is really more the need for attention, and then incidentally. Some people are good, some people are bad. But why else could you explain people horrible doing stand-up?
Right. Well, what about like those? I mean, what about the sort of common thread of comics being shy and antisocial? Is it like
forcing themselves to do it?
Is it like, this is the only way I feel comfortable getting attention?
Yeah, it feels like. I mean, and there are comics who are like, they have jokes and they're afraid to say them. They say them out loud, but. At the end of the day, there's a desire to be on stage if you're on stage. I don't think there's these jokes are great and I don't want to say them on stage. I don't want to have the attention at all, but people have to hear these jokes. I feel like the need for attention is almost the only thing, the only algorithm connecting all stand-ups. I could be wrong, but it seems like why else?
That's why I always hate when comics get up there and do the whole, like certain comedians do the thing where like they don't even seem like they want to be there. They're like hardly like they don't even put their drink down ever. They're just like I just like there's some tortured artist who like must be on. It's like get over yourself. Like you don't. No one's making you go on stage.
No, it's you. So if you act like you're too cool, it's like, but you chose to do this.
But some people like eat that up. That kind of comic.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole new generation of comedy, which is like you're not doing well, but you look cool while you're bombing.
Right.
And then like that comedy is interesting because like I'm like the opposite. I'm sweaty and yelling and just.
You want to be there. You must be there.
And I certainly am trying.
Yes.
Which sometimes is good and sometimes maybe too much, but. I do notice the people who like don't try at all. Sometimes I've done shows where I get like laughs the whole time, and then someone who doesn't try at all goes on stage, and they don't really get laughs at all. But then at the end, they'll finally say a joke that the audience like just dies laughing at because they haven't been laughing the whole time. But then at the end, I think they think both comics are equally good. I think they can't tell the difference.
I don't think audiences notice laughs per minute.
No,
I think as long as they laughed once really hard and it's towards the end.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're like, that guy was great. It was all leading up to this one joke.
Exactly. You can't trust the masses. That's how Hitler got popular, the masses. I don't like, people are like, oh, that comic, he gets laughs. He's in an arena, so did Hitler. So what? You like Hitler? Is he great? I mean, like.
Trump gets laughs?
Yeah, masses are bad.
Bad.
It's like an evil place we're just trying to maybe do good in, but like, we should just accept that, like, yeah, hacks do well. That's what makes a hack.
Right.
That's why if hacks bombed, they wouldn't be upsetting. Like, you wouldn't be annoyed by a hacker just bombing all the time.
No.
But, so comedy you pursued in your 20s or?
Yeah. I did my first open mic when I was like 22, but then I didn't go back again for a while. And then when I was 24, I like hit the ground running. So
you're playing viola, and it is interesting because you do have these two artistic relationships, you know? And it is interesting. I feel like you've probably talked about this on every podcast. It's new to my 12 listeners. So viola is also something like at a certain point you're like, oh, I've always done this. I'm not even questioning it anymore, right? So it's lost a little luster, right? Like,
oh yeah, it's like a relationship you've been in for a while. It's just all the magic's gone.
All the magic, yeah.
Occasionally you have like a good experience and you're like, I remember why I love it. But it's like
But you can't even remember why. You can't even remember the choice to do it. You know, it's just like, yeah. So what drove you to stand up in that period? Like, what was that thing?
Well, I always loved stand up, and I was like, in another life, I'd do stand up.
You did say that?
Yeah, but I was shy.
Like, in another life, when I'm a peasant, I'll do stand up.
Yes.
Imagine me doing stand up.
Papa, can you imagine me telling jokes?
In some other life, I'd be a clown, though. I think I'd really enjoy it.
So I would always tell people that, and everyone would be like, well, they're miserable, like they're depressed, and it's like, well, have you met musicians?
Who would tell you that? Like
musicians, and my family was just kind of like, but you know, like you would have to dedicate so much time to do that, and you're already doing music.
Right.
It just, and I wasn't that serious either when I said it. And then I got an injury in my wrist when I was in my master's, so I couldn't play for a couple months.
What is the injury from?
Just repetitive stress from wanking it too much. No, from like just, it's a contortion when you play, and some people are just more injury prone, or I'm clenching too much.
It's from the
viola. Yeah. It's like tendonitis induced from playing. And, you know, I like to say
that's a good sign you could take a break when your body's like, I literally have to take a break from playing this.
Yes, yeah. And some people are just more injury prone than others. Some people, you know, they have all this tension that they need to release. And so I just was holding a lot of tension, and I just think I'm kind of injury prone in general. I'm just a little weakling. But so I had all this time off, but I was still like enrolled in music school, but wasn't playing. So I just went to an open mic. I was in New York. At Juilliard.
Juilliard.
So as most
kids start at Stanford, but I just had to go to Juilliard.
I said not me.
Yeah.
So I went to an open mic at Broadway Comedy Club, and it was like me and 5 comics, and people who called themselves. We were all just terrible, but I loved it, and I also dealt with a lot of performance anxiety. My hands would shake. And one thing I noticed is that I could tell jokes even with my hands shaking. And I was like, oh, like this is something I can do. Like I felt like all this relief. And
I've heard you say this before, which is interesting, which is that like if your hand's shaking when you're playing, it fucks up.
Yeah.
So if your hand's shaking in comedy, it's awkward, but like it's not going to fuck up the timing of the joke. But your hand shaking as a violist will fuck it up completely, right?
Yeah, and this is something I just thought of, which is that when I'm practicing viola, my hand's not shaking. So then when I'm at the performance and I'm nervous, all of a sudden it throws me off. Whereas comedy, like I've only ever done it nervous because it's
there's no practice.
It's all in front of people. So I just developed a persona that worked with the shaking. Sometimes I don't shake as much now, but like my default is kind of this nervous, angry person. And so it was just like really liberating. And I was like,
right. Because I'd say that's one of the huge differences between music and comedy. That music you can practice for hours and hours and hours. And stand-up you can only practice on stage. You can only, that's why stand-up is so awful. You can only practice in front of people.
Right.
You can only learn via humiliation.
But also why it's great, because like there's just way less letdown, because with music you spend all these hours practicing and like getting something perfect, and then you have the added pressure of performance. Like we should really, like, I think classical musicians should just practice performing way more than they do.
Right, because you don't do it as much, and then when you do, it's like is that a big issue in that world, that people like practice and they're great at practicing and then they like fall apart on stage, or it's like a major...
I mean, probably not as much as I'm sure, like, you know, all the greats are like, yeah, I practice performing. You didn't, you idiot. You know, it's probably a thing that people, or you record yourself, like other ways to add pressure on before a performance.
But either way, the practice is still going to be the majority of the experience, no matter what, is it not? Like, yeah,
because most classical musicians who are any good are at least practicing like 4 or 5 hours a day by themselves.
Right.
And that's not just to get good. Like they do that to maintain it their whole lives.
And it is a different world on stage. So you do have, the interesting thing with music, you have this disparity between rehearsal, practicing, and the public. And with stand-up, you don't. It's all forged into one thing.
Right. You might write alone, but it's just, that's such a different, it's like a prep process.
Yeah. It's all, it's why it takes honestly, why it takes so long, I think, to get good at stand-up. It's because it takes a long time to get those hours in. It's like, you know.
Just to get the 10,000 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, how many spots is that?
I can't even listen to comics when they're like a couple years in, because they're just too nervous for me to even really gauge if they're good or not. It's just like, too much nervousness, you know?
Yeah. Do you ever see an early comic and it reminds you of an early version of yourself, and you're kind of like, oh, if I listen to this too much, I feel like I'm gonna like go back to, like, I can't even listen to this.
It's triggering because I like blocked it all out. Yeah. I once, a couple of years ago, I guess I like walked through an open mic. It was actually in Louisville. I had done a show at a place and they were doing an open mic afterwards. And I walked through the open mic to like go somewhere to get my backpack or something. And I just felt the sadness of an open mic waft over me. That sadness of the fact that no one's there for an actual show. So there's no real energy in the room. And it's just like sad comics watching a comic on stage. That awful sad energy that comes from that.
And desperation.
And desperation. And just no real excitement because there's no audience members. It's just comic. It was just like the sadness. I was like, I got to block this out. It's so awful, you know? Yeah. But so that's interesting. So you have this thing now where your hands could shake, but that's your persona. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you do beta blockers with viola?
Oh yeah.
Is that frowned upon, or does it matter?
I don't know. Everyone does it. If there's
right,
especially for auditions. I mean, if someone says they don't take them, they probably are lying.
Right.
Some people just don't get nervous, but there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't like make you better. It just slows down your heart rate.
Right.
So I've played badly on beta blockers before.
Right.
You know, because I'm just having a bad day. So yeah, I mean, I'll still take them sometimes. There's no shame in it. It's just sometimes
for stand-up or viola or both?
For viola, or if I fun fact, when I did the Tonight Show recently with my viola,
right,
I definitely took a beta blocker.
You did, but is that because of the viola?
Yeah, because I knew even if I wasn't nervous, I was going to be excited.
Right,
and that's the same physical reaction for me.
Right,
so.
Of course, yeah.
And I don't know, my heart takes off like so quickly.
So you're saying your second Fallon doesn't count?
Yeah. But the only thing that's looked down at, I think the only reason to like frown upon it is if it feels like a Band-Aid covering up a bigger issue that you're not figuring out. But for me, it's like,
no, if it's just,
whatever.
If it's going to just well, especially if you're playing on stage like viola for like, live, you're playing viola and Fallon. You can't have your hand shaking for that. It's,
Yeah, and it's honestly more of a placebo anyway. Because with comedy, again, because the nerves don't fuck me up. I'm not nervous about getting nervous, but if I were playing viola without taking it, I would be like, what if my hands shake? What if my hands shake? And it would add this whole other level of anxiety. Whereas if I take half a beta blocker and just like, well, I know my hands won't shake, then I'm just not even worrying about it.
Exactly. I also feel like with comedy alone, and maybe I'm wrong, with comedy alone, if you're really nervous and you embrace that nervousness and then you go on stage and you get the laughs, that nervousness kind of turns into a high. But I assume with music, if you're nervous and it really like fucks you up, it's like you probably don't have, like, I guess with comedy, I would say like, I don't like when people get drunk before they go on stage or something, like, you should really feel the nervousness because that translates into a high when that's
with energy too.
That's energy. But with music, is it not the same since you're not exactly getting a response from the audience.
Yeah, I mean,
that like makes you feel okay.
Yeah, it's harder to get into that like, oh, everything's okay now. When you get that first laugh, it's like, okay. But I remember,
That's what I'm saying, the laugh. If you're nervous, you go on stage and that big laugh comes. The nervousness turns into like a really pleasurable feeling, which is why I don't think it's good to drink or numb your feelings, because then you're depriving yourself of that almost like interaction between the nervousness and the laugh, and the nervousness turning into like kind of a joyous confidence. But with music, because you're not getting a laugh, in a way, I guess what I'm saying is maybe it is better to take beta blockers in that situation because you don't get the same, you know.
Yeah, there's less that might happen to ease your nerves. I do remember one time I had a performance and my bow was shaking and it was like just an awful performance and I was in hell. This was before I had started taking any beta blockers. And then all of a sudden this like old senile man, like he jumped up and was like, I gotta get out of here. And like, and, you know, we didn't stop playing, but the attention was like drawn to him, and I was just like, oh, this is the easiest performance of my life. Like, it just totally shifted me out of that.
You need those moments sometimes.
Yeah, and that is what happens in comedy, like constantly, either because someone's laughing or because someone like heckles. Anything that's like in the moment, it's just like helps.
It always makes it so much better.
Yeah,
just being present is the best thing with comedy. And like, so if anything happens like that, it just like knocks you out of gets you out of your head, which is great.
Yeah.
So what I always, and I've asked this before, I never quite understood. Now you know with stand up, you know, like the key is to get a laugh, and the laugh makes you feel good. How do you know? Well, for some people, how do you know? I know it's a stupid question. How do you know when you're doing well playing music?
Listen back to the recording.
Really? That's it? So, but is there a relationship between you and the audience?
I don't know. I talk about this in my solo show, actually. Like just the thing that
well, people aren't going to watch that. Talk about it here.
You're not going to see it.
I'm joking.
No, they're not. The audience.
It's a great show. Check it out. Well, it's not. Is it playing right now or
tonight?
Is it really?
Union Hall tonight.
Really?
No, but this will be out after that.
We gotta put this out
now.
12
live. Let's do it live.
Well, go to our website. It's a great show, and you'll be able to see it. I'm sure you do it a bunch, right?
Yeah. It's in the development phase, so you know. Every time you see it, it might be a little different.
Yeah. So go check it out, or wait till the end when it's
actually okay.
Yeah. But anyway,
but so. One thing that frustrates me with music is that there is like more lying the audience can do to you. So it's like more of a mind fuck. Like I'm like, was it good? And then something, no, it was really, really good. And you're like, okay, I guess. I mean, I felt like I was kind of out of tune or like a little shaky.
But who are you asking this? Audience?
Like a friend who came, or, you know, my parents who watched.
But it has to be kind of a music expert, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing, because like if you have an audience at a show, like they're not going to know, right?
Sure. I mean, I've messed up badly enough where I think anyone would know.
Really?
Yeah. But with comedy,
like you shot your pants. That's something in a regular audience member.
Wish that was what happened.
Like,
no,
that's not how that.
No, it's just like
that's not how Mahler's supposed to go right there. I know the violist doesn't shit themselves on the.
You know. It's written in the score that the second bassoon just takes a huge
something
dump
Mozart
on stage.
could do, right? He was into shit humor.
Was he? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Poop. Yeah.
Right? I don't know.
I feel like that sounds right. I don't know for sure. I mean, actually, I feel like I know. Yes.
I mean, I don't know. Amadeus? I don't know. But I also think he did. Have you not seen Amadeus?
Yeah. Is there like shit humor in it?
Yeah. He's always making fun of shit humor. Yeah. God, I guess I know more about classical music than you do. This is awkward.
You might. I didn't even remember who Berlioz was for a second. But yeah. With comedy, either way, I mean, this happens in comedy too. You think you killed, and you listen back to the recording, and you're like, it wasn't actually that great.
Right.
Or you think you bombed, and you're like, no, I was getting laughs.
It's literally always, it's always like that. It's like you didn't. The recording is always, not as bad or not as good.
Yeah, I mean, and with music, it's like, I don't know. Part of me just knows if I messed up or not. So like, I know, like if I missed a note or if I played something out of tune, like I just know if it's going well in that sense. But there have been times where I've listened back to my recordings and I'm like, oh, this was like so much better than I thought. Like it was right under my ear, so I heard that mistake much more clear. Or the opposite, where I'm like, oh no, that part was fine, but this part was garbage, and I had no idea until I listened back.
So it's really listening back,
yeah. Because no matter what you're doing, I mean, we're just our inner critic is always kind of delusional,
and it's how but it is how you're feeling during it, right?
Yeah, and that too.
But you aren't playing off the audience, right?
No, because the audience is supposed to be silent.
Right.
I mean,
you're not playing off some kind of like or whatever.
No, not
Okay.
really. I mean, sometimes there's like concerts where there's a piece on it that's supposed to get like a little laugh because of like the way the music sounds at that. You know, and you hear the audience
Hilarious.
Go like, I mean,
Hilarious
I've definitely been
of the oh, that was good.
Oh,
that was a good
that
one.
Haydn point. There are pieces
Is that really a like what is?
Oh yeah.
Give me an example.
Pieces that end like it'll be like da da, and then it'll be like boo-doo-doo, and that's the end of the piece, and then everyone's like, like I mean, it gets a laugh.
So that's a musical joke.
Yeah, and there's totally musical jokes. Everywhere.
It's just that it goes boo, like at the very end, instead of something big or something.
Like something unexpected. I mean, just like jokes. It's the surprise of the twists and turns it takes.
Right. People laugh at that. They're not like it's. I would say it's probably not an authentic laugh.
It's more like a discomfort kind of laugh.
Yeah,
like the laugh you make when it's like too quiet for too long, and you're like,
release of tension.
Yeah, it's not like killing.
But in a way, like your Fallon, it's like you brought the viola. You finally gave it the attention it deserves. Yeah, you brought it out of the symphony where it's hidden. You know, just doing all the thankless work, and you gave it the first. I believe, if I'm correct, that's the first solo of a viola ever.
On the Tonight Show? Maybe.
No, just in general. Let's just go with this. And
I'm really, hero.
But you do like combining those two things, right? That is like.
I like it. To me, it came from an organic place of inspiration because it was just like, what if I just kind of like combined them in that juxtaposition and I just tried it on stage and it like, you know, it really worked and it was like this exciting new like rhythm I could play with.
Yeah, and you are. Sorry.
Oh, but I'm just saying now that it's kind of set, it feels a little gimmicky to me when I do it, but I don't think it comes across yet as an audience member unless they've seen me do it a bunch of times.
It feels gimmicky to you not to, but it was a thrill when you first started.
Absolute thrill, yeah.
Isn't that funny that something can be so scary in the beginning? And so like, oh, this is an experiment. It's not going to work. And then eventually you've been doing it so much. You're like, I'm a hack. I'm not playing it safe.
I feel like such a hack. And whenever it kills after like I'll usually on the road, I'll do 40 minutes of just jokes. And then I'll bring the viola out at the end. Like, you want to relay some viola? And I'll do the thing you saw on Fallon.
Yeah.
And
which is great. Check it out. Great. Both Fallons are great.
Yeah. Thank you. It always like murders harder than whatever I've been doing before.
Yeah.
And it infuriates me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, first of all, you're like, oh, I guess you did have it in you. I guess all my other stuff just wasn't this funny.
It's almost like you're another comedian going after you.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, they really broke open the room. It's like they're showing you the potential. The first comedian didn't.
It's honestly heartbreaking.
It's like if I halfway through became a black comic and just destroyed so much better than I was as a white comic.
Just devastating.
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, but that's, you know.
But, you know, also, yeah, it's a cool thing that they don't see that often.
Well, you are also like uniquely talented. A lot of your talent has to do with the versatility of your talent. I mean, to be the world's greatest viola player, and and also a great stand-up is so unique. So it makes sense to like, you know, show them both off.
Yeah,
you know,
you're making me feel so good.
But you are very talented. You have a. What time is it? What are we at? It's 4:52. Okay. But yeah, so we can kind of wrap this up a little bit. But yeah, so it is cool to see you showcase both those talents. And you know, I'm interested in the viola, the comedy, because I was similar in the sense that I started out screenwriting, playwriting. I didn't want to do stand up. I thought it was like. I kind of had that whole another life kind of thing. Like, I was like, yeah, I'd like to do it, but it's also it just seems so immature. You know what I mean?
You remind me of me sometimes in that way because you'll even text me now where I'm like, oh my God, I'll be like, your special was so good or whatever you killed. And you're like, yeah, but it's just dumb stand up. And I know you're like, I really wanted to be a screenwriter. And it's just
right.
And that's sort of how you're like, yeah, I know it can do this thing that everyone likes, whatever.
Right.
There's this other thing you're like kind of chasing.
Well, yeah, I guess so. It's stand-up is this weird, it's like half an art form and half a sport, you know what I mean? But it's also just a giant popularity contest. So sometimes you get bogged down by that, you know what I mean? Right. Like, and the artistic part gets, forgotten. You know what I mean? You just end up competing, you know what I mean? At least if you're like a novelist, you're competing with just other novelists. I'm competing with like morons who can do 5 minutes but have like way more TikTok followers than I'll ever have. You get sidetracked by that and start competing with that.
But don't you think novelists feel the same way about like, I don't know, short story writers or like people on Twitter?
Twitter, maybe. Yeah, I guess they do. Yeah, I guess we're all
who then get like a book deal and they're like, well, they can't write a book.
Everything's a popularity contest.
Yeah.
But I guess everything's a popularity contest. I will say, to be a stand-up, you can be the biggest moron, hustler, charlatan in the world. So I do feel like the thing about stand-up that's annoying is you can be in the world with people who are just used car salesmen. Like half the stand-ups I know are just used car salesmen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I feel like also if you were like an actor,
you'd
meet a lot of like master bullshitters who are
I guess I just hate whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. We're never going to be happy, Raanan.
Yeah. But I'm on my next file and I'm going to be doing stand-up while writing a screenplay.
Oh, that's good. Or you'll just do a reading of your screenplay.
And then go back and forth between that and jokes. No, I think I'll be typing it up. Scene.
Cut to.
Interior. He walks into the bar. So anyway, how's it going? How are you? How's it going? Good to be here. A man walks in a dark overcoat. The light.
That's not a bad idea.
Well, like now that you've lowered the thing to where it's just that you can't just do you raise the bar. You can't just do one talent on Fallon anymore. You got to do two. So I'll be doing that.
God, I've opened it to so much riffraff.
But you are writing a movie right now, which I read the screenplay. I saw it too. I mean, I read it, but I also saw it visually. The
screenplay, yes. The movie does not exist.
The movie does not exist. I saw it on the page, and I read it, and I saw it in my head. So it's great, and you're raising money now for it, and it's kind of combining viola. I guess not stand-up, but it's very funny, and your stand-up persona, maybe.
Yeah, and it's about a viola. It's semi-autobiographical.
It's great. I'm very excited for it. I read it, and you had such a good sense of yourself as a character, which was really cool to see. You had a good sense of how to show yourself in a movie, or your alter ego, your persona. It was really cool, and it's awesome that you're making a movie. See, like that's like I mean that's the hardest thing to do, make a movie, because it's all so fucking mysterious.
There's so many people involved. It's it's the most complicated thing to do, it seems.
And there's no. Like I'm trying to figure out some stuff, with a movie, and there's no I just feel like everyone's very vague and mysterious. There's no even just try to get like a fucking budget figured out.
I know.
No one
It took me so long. I found I have 4 producers now who are just great and they believe in it, but it took me so many people who were just like, I don't know. Yeah, like send me the script, and just like nothing. And I don't know. It's all, they make it so elusive. Maybe because everyone's kind of like winging it.
Yeah, and I think people don't really know what they're doing a lot. So you just have conversations where it's just a lot of vague shit. And it's a lot of like roadblocks that maybe don't even exist, but they're there if you want to actually never make your movie. Right, exactly.
Well, I mean, this is like $1 million film, and you could just say, oh, well, I don't want to make a film for $1 million, or you could say, okay, well, how can I make it a $300,000 film?
How do you make it at that? Yeah.
Maybe it's like 2 scenes you need to change. I don't know. It's just not. You just figure it out.
Right.
Which I guess is why it's hard to get advice, because the advice is kind of just like you just figure it out.
And it's all, when you write a screenplay, it's all just like imagining stuff, and then the making it is just all practicalities.
Yeah.
It's all just and from the things I filmed, the thing about movies is everything's a problem. That's essentially what it is. Like when you film something, there will be a lot of problems that day.
Right.
And that's essentially what it is. It's just dealing with problems.
That really is all. I feel like all the prep we're doing is just anticipating all the problems.
And then the problems are completely different than what you anticipated.
Right. it's just you're gonna be stressed. I mean, I made a web series kind of version of the movie, so I know a little bit what it's like to just feel kind of stressed and frazzled and tired and all of that. But it was to a much smaller scale, and I had way fewer people working on it with me. So maybe it'll be easier because I'll have more help, but I don't know.
No, definitely
not.
It'll
be harder. Yeah. One can
maybe this feature-length movie will be easier than this webisode I did.
Yeah.
But it's amazing that you're doing it. I think I think that's such a hard thing to do because it takes more than just. It takes a level of confidence that I struggle with to really fucking put, I mean, yeah, stand-up takes confidence, but you're just going on stage. Yeah. Making a movie puts in a lot of time and organization and raising money and all that shit, and you're actually doing it. You're raising the money right now, and I'm really jinxing this whole project.
Yeah,
but
if you want to donate,
yeah.
Well, the Kickstarter's not even up yet, but just I don't know. Follow me.
I want
Yeah, follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, follow
It'll
her on
all be
Instagram.
on there or my website.
And donate to her movie. It's great.
Give me money.
Yeah, give her money.
But there is like the fear that you're going to raise all this money and do all this work, and then it's like a shitty film. That's where I think the big fear comes.
Sure,
me,
failure.
Where it's just like, well, it could end up just being like a bad movie.
And then, I'm so afraid to make a movie out of my screenplays because all I do is talk shit about other movies. So you're
like,
really,
yeah.
So you're really terrified. You know what I mean? That's why with Joe we had that podcast where we talked shit about movies. Then he had to make a movie, and it's like you put yourself in this bad position. We're like this movie. We're just sitting there. Yeah. He's just like Casablanca sucks. Wizard of Oz can suck my dick or whatever. And then he makes a movie. It's
man.
So but you don't talk shit about movies really. So that's good. You know what I mean?
All out of fear.
Joe said after he made his movie, he was like, I can't criticize a movie ever again. I'm just amazed that anything gets made.
Yeah.
But you're doing it, and that's really awesome, and that's really exciting. I think I think a movie's gonna be great, and and I think it's great that you have, you're telling me on the phone the other day, you feel some self-doubt sometimes, but you really just you regret the things you don't do. Yeah. And even if it's failure,
I'll regret it less than if I didn't do it at all.
Yeah, and it's not going to be a failure. You know what I mean?
No.
I mean, there are sometimes like you make something and then after a while you're like, hey, that didn't change anything in my life. But even that's
it's still
a long process.
Yeah, right.
There's never you never put it out or like, it's a failure.
Yeah, right. It's more gradual than that. Kind of like the climate,
I'm being so encouraging. Yeah,
it's not like one day we're all just gonna be underwater.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your movie's not going to just fail. It will slowly peter out.
Right, yes. Into oblivion.
Yeah, but you'll have a lot of compliments before that.
Yeah, exactly.
In hope that slowly fade out. Yeah, it's like climbing. Yeah. So it won't be that bad, but you're doing it. It's going to be great. Of course, it's going to be great. It's a great movie. You're very talented, and I'm excited. I can't wait to see it. You're an inspiration to me, which is sad because you're a lot younger. I mean, how old are you?
I was told not to say 31.
31. Okay. So I'm 38. So we're the same age.
Yeah.
But
in men-women years, yes.
Yeah, we're the same age. I thought you were a little younger, but
Thank you. Yes.
But yeah,
you had that really funny tweet. You were like, I'd rather be mistaken for older. No, it was something about being closer to death. You'd rather look worse, but be further away from death.
Right. Yeah. When people are like, "Oh, you're 38. You look great." I'm like, "Yeah, I'd rather." Not look great, but have more life. Yeah. Have more life to live. Well, thank you so much, Isabel. I really can't thank you enough for doing this podcast. And go check her out on Instagram. Isabel is a violinist.
Isabel Hagen _ or IsabelHagen.com.
IsabelHagen.com. And, and I hope we learned a lot that the viola is something, an instrument. I'm sure a lot of people didn't know that before, and different than the violin. And go support her, go watch her stuff. She's great. Thank you all. We'll be back next week.